Hello, and thank you for joining us for week 6 in our winter series that is 8 weeks looking at 8 things Jesus said during the Sermon on the Mount. These are 8 times that Jesus announces or declares the people who will be happy and blessed and why. Now, our series is called A Different Kind of Happy because Jesus' understanding of happiness, how to pursue it, how to experience it, is not the same as our American understanding. Jesus' statements about what makes a godly life should absolutely challenge the way we think and act in our own pursuit of happiness. For instance, Americans tend to believe that by avoiding difficulty, by making ourselves comfortable, that's how we pursue happiness. Things that make us uncomfortable are to be avoided. And the difficulty with this is that human life requires that we overcome difficulty and discomfort. And avoiding adversity, that just blunts our growth. Frederick Douglass was an orator, a writer, and a statesman. And he was born into slavery. He escaped as a young man, learned to read and write, and he became the leader of the abolitionist movement, playing a key role in the struggle to end slavery in the United States. He wrote several books, including his own autobiography, which detailed his life as a slave and his difficult journey to freedom. He eventually became one of the most famous voices of the anti-slavery movement. In it, he said this: "If there is no struggle, there is no progress." Douglass could have stayed a slave on a plantation. He could have lived a life under the ownership of someone pursuing their own comfort, forcing him to work. Instead, he began a struggle for freedom and growth. He embraced persecution and eventually overthrew what there was no way to avoid. Now, this is not the way we think right now. We believe difficulty is overcome by finding comfortability and hiding from adversity. And we can see this very clearly in our public interactions with others. Whether it's in person or through a device, if there's an audience, most of us, we have a fear of public disagreement. Having the wrong outlook, using outdated vocabulary, or even just expressing ourselves poorly. It leaves us open and vulnerable to spotlighting our perceived ignorance or arrogance, being visibly mocked, mostly in the comments section. Now, while this fear of public disgrace is an anxiety shared by people of nearly every background, we don't think of it that way, do we? We always think of it as those people out there who have a problem. Whichever side of a disagreement we're on, it makes us more comfortable to think that the other side is the problem. See, as a pastor, I'm regularly hearing complaints about the hypocrisy of the political left for not actually being open-minded to all ideas. The political right wonders, hey, how did things get this way in America, where you can get canceled for not thinking correctly or for supporting the wrong causes? It makes us feel comfortable to think that this is what the other side is doing. Can we be honest? It's always been this way in America. It's just that some of us aren't used to it, and we think it should never happen to us. See, we didn't used to call it canceling. We called it boycotting. And Christians, we were the best at it. Do you need to denounce a movement or a movie? Maybe put a whole people group in check? Well, then you organize and collect signatures. Don't buy their product. Post negative reviews. Pretty soon, the folks at Disney will just have to go back to doing things the right way. And by that, we mean our way. America has been like this since scarlet letters and public stocks. We're just not used to having to face it ourselves. And here's why, right? Long ago, American Christians, we transferred our faith, hope, and love from Jesus Christ, and we placed it into the comfortable hands of democracy and commerce. See, American Christians have long believed that our power comes from the majority sharing a common morality, but that's just democracy. And democracy uses majority power and financial power to make the moral majority most comfortable. Now, you might be thinking of hitting the stop button right now because I'm some sort of woke pastor with an agenda. But before you do, hear me out on 2 things. First, all sides are guilty of what I'm saying because all sides are human and fallen, which is why it's foolish for believers in Jesus to place our faith and hope in human solutions like American democracy and commerce. Go ahead and pick a side to vote for. but don't ever trust your soul to it because it isn't Jesus, and only Jesus satisfies our soul's craving. That's not woke, that's Christianity. And the second thing is this. Jesus says that his blessing and joy are always available and possible despite the persecution that both sides create. And if I were you, I'd want to stick around to hear more about that. But it's going to take resisting the urge to be comfortable because we never find a godly happiness or a growth hiding from conflict in pursuit of comfort. And that's our first thought and reaction, isn't it? See, this is why so many people recently packed up their lives and migrated to where they think the majority of the community will agree with them. And it's why the very people who live in fear of being canceled by society cancel their families, their friends, and even their church when it doesn't make them comfortable. See, we seek social comfort in large groups of people. But it's also why we don't speak up when speaking might cause us to be identified as a disagreeable person. It's why we don't act when our actions might cause us to stand out as a displeasing person. And it's why we don't think for ourselves when an influencer can. We go along with the crowd without ever asking what God wants. Now, we respond to the anxiety of criticism with avoidance, hiding within fortresses of our own making. Fortresses not formed from stone and steel, but padded and pillowed. And these happy places are different for each of us. Sometimes it's a location. Oftentimes it's the distraction of screens, a bowl of salty or sweet, a cloud of smoke or a bottle to numb our feelings. We pursue comfort, thinking it's the path to happiness, when actually the pursuit of individual comfort without divine revelation, nobility of character, that's actually the path to disintegration of relationships, degeneration of spirit, and the dissipation of our body. But God wants and offers us more than this, which is why Jesus stood on the mountainside and he called humanity to divine courage in the face of difficulty. Because facing our fears and finding joy in the midst of hardship makes us more like Jesus. And it gives us an eternal identity that no one can steal, kill, or destroy, even after we're gone. Here's Jesus describing a different kind of happy for his followers in Matthew 5:10. It says this, God blesses those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses you when people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things against you because you are my followers. The brokenness of our world, human resistance to godliness and resistance to godly responses to brokenness, that just ensures that people living godly lives will face opposition to living as Jesus would in this world. And that very persecution identifies us as both followers of Jesus and the people that God says he will bless with happiness even in the midst of difficulty. Jesus declares that God will bless people persecuted for righteousness, for doing right, and he describes what it will look like. It will look like lying to make you look bad publicly. It will look like mocking you to produce emotional pain privately. The Bible even describes physical suffering. Jesus is telling us what kind of discomfort to expect. And there's another difficulty, the difficulty of determining if we're being persecuted for righteousness. Perhaps you've encountered someone who doesn't share your definition of righteousness. You don't agree about what doing right is. This is common even among Christians. And it's why we have to define what righteousness and persecution for righteousness both is and isn't. And straight away, we need to know that righteousness doesn't come from a human morality. See, most people believe that Christianity is all about living a moral life. They see the Bible as a manual with rules, follow them, and you're righteous. For others, Christianity means loving others and helping them find comfort. No manual is needed. Love others and you'll be righteous. Now, these two ideas sound helpful, but they're both actually forms of comfort seeking. The manual helps that first group feel very comfortable knowing who's wrong and that they're right. Following rules, both written and unwritten rules, makes you moral and therefore righteous. And those people who disagree, well, they're immoral. And their disagreement is persecuting you for righteousness. Now, because you don't really need Jesus to do what I just described, it's actually self-righteousness. To the other group, kindness is the only rule, and it's demonstrated by lavishing approval on others. Comfort is pursued by avoiding confrontation. Everyone is right, and nothing is wrong. Some things are just not right for you. But this method enslaves people to the approval of others. Group approval becomes the standard of morality, and those who disagree are shamed for not upholding the community policy. And you don't need to be anything. You don't even need a God for this kind of self-righteousness. Each group depends on a moral code to determine righteousness, allowing them to identify disagreement as criticism and criticism as persecution. And not only does trying to live morally leave us feeling persecuted, it also makes us a persecutor of those who don't share our vision of self-righteousness. See, ultimately, moral codes can't produce Christian righteousness because they only address external behavior. And the scriptures present that our problem is actually internal. Sin is inner self-centeredness that reveals itself externally. And trying to defeat sin with moral codes is like trying to defeat a cancer with aspirin. See, Christian righteousness comes to us not from laws or rules, but from a person, Jesus of Nazareth, the Messiah of God. And as we worship him, his righteousness comes to us in two distinct ways. The moment we surrender to Jesus as King of our life, he declares us righteous. This is called justification. And then, as we continue obeying his direction, he renovates us from the inside out. And the more we know him, the more we become like him. And that's when our external actions change, because the way we think and feel is being challenged. Now, I'd like to talk about crowns for a minute, since we're on the subject. In 2005, Janelle and I visited the United Kingdom. And the UK is a union of 4 countries spread across 2 islands, England, Scotland, and Wales on one, and Northern Ireland on the other. It's all that's left of the British Empire, an empire that once spanned the entire globe from its epicenter in London. Now, on our trip, we visited London, and we had a great time seeing Big Ben, Parliament, Big Ben, Parliament. But a highlight was the crown jewels. Now, they keep these jewels locked in the Tower of London, and it's not just a tower, it's a fortress. And they're very proud of how they used to publicly disembowel traitors here. On the grounds are these guides, right? And they're dressed in traditional garb. They're called the beef eaters. And they'll tell you all the gory details of who got the hook and who got the gibbet and how far your giblets will stretch. It's utterly macabre. But once inside, you enter a secure gallery to see the jewels. And it's not just a pile of gems. You see, the crown jewels are a collection of bejeweled items belonging to the royal family. There are swords and scepters encrusted with precious stones. But the prestige pieces are, of course, the crowns. And I say crowns because there's a lot of crowns. The big crown, the crown of all crowns, is given to the king or queen on their coronation day. It's the crown of St. Edward the Confessor, the king who converted England to Christianity. You used to be able to do that. Just tell everyone they're now Christians. We stopped doing that, though, because it doesn't really work for anybody, really. The crown of Edward passes to each new monarch, and let me tell you what they did to deserve it. Nothing. This crown is inherited. It's given to you as a result of your bloodline. All King Charles had to do at his coronation in September was receive it and swear to honor it with his life. Now, among the other crowns on display is this little one, right? It's called the Welsh coronet. And it belonged to the King of Wales. And if you're wondering why England has the crown of Wales, it's because they won it by overcoming the Welsh, making them part of the UK. It's a crown attained by victory. Here's the connection. Righteousness comes to us first, like the crown of King Edward. When we give our lives to Jesus, he passes his righteousness to us. and we've done nothing to earn it. It's a gift we receive and honor with our lives. We receive hereditary righteousness as part of Jesus' bloodline. Because of Jesus, we live with confidence. We have nothing to prove to anyone. Now, after Jesus declares us just, we honor his gift by living lives that demonstrate his goodness to our world, and we achieve lesser crowns of our own that demonstrate his work, his gift in and through us. As a result of victory over sin in our own life, over the spiritual evil that comes against us, we image God to the world so that they see in us Jesus' love and justice through the way we live. You see, righteousness comes to us from being declared just by Jesus and living lives of justice where Jesus is made visible to the world. And this is where persecution comes in. You see, persecution for righteousness' sake is facing condemnation and hostility from others because we are living and looking like Jesus in a world that rejects him as king. And by living as image bearers, we will absolutely offend the moral codes of both kinds of self-righteous people. By not following their codes, we are offending them. Instead, we are being shaped by the Holy Spirit to look like Jesus. Now, the word that Jesus uses here to describe persecution gives us some insight into what persecution is and isn't. Jesus uses the Greek word dioko, and dioko indicates that persecution is an aggressive pursuit of prey in order to kill or capture. And this means that persecution is something actively done to us by someone pursuing us, not someone defending our antagonism against them. Persecution is not our predatory behavior, it's someone else's predatory behavior based on their disagreement with Jesus revealed by our obedience to him. And it's something we should expect because Jesus teaches us a lot of things that people who aren't Christians find offensive. See, Christians believe that life within our reality is intentional, not accidental. Christians believe that humans are more than a highly developed animal. Christians believe that the historical figure Jesus is God and that he died and came back to life. And on top of that, we believe that there's only one way to know God, which is through Jesus. Christians believe that Jesus will come back someday and set up his kingdom on earth. Christians believe that we do what God calls us to do, not what we feel like doing. Christians believe that everyone should have the right to life. Christians believe that sex outside of marriage cheapens it. Christians believe that pornography demeans the image of God in others. Christians believe that drunkenness destroys human dignity. There is a long list of unpopular beliefs that people will demean us for, and we shouldn't be shocked or return antagonism about it. And we should also not be stunned that when we respond to brokenness like Jesus would, and somebody else doesn't like it, don't miss this. When we respond to brokenness like Jesus would, somebody won't like it. Sometimes it's even other Christians who are opposed to mercy and grace being given to others because they are intent on waging a war to protect or assert their moral code. See, being persecuted happens when we respond like Jesus would to crisis situations. Jesus responds to crisis situations with offers of help and assistance. When we respond to like Jesus would to accusations, which is not responding in kind, like a lamb before his shearers was silent, we're going to be persecuted. Persecution happens when we respond like Jesus would to aggressions by turning the other cheek. It happens when we respond to brokenness with grace and truthfulness to people who have failed. And persecution happens when we confront religious hypocrisy that undermines the gospel of Jesus. See, our problem is that Christians tend to forget that God is calling us to live out Jesus' righteousness, not asking us to defend a moral code. He's asking us to not respond the way a Pharisee would respond to human brokenness, and then be shocked to find ourselves being spoken up against, when someone speaks against our self-righteousness. You see, much of the persecution decried by American Christians isn't really persecution for Jesus' righteousness. It's just people disagreeing with us for having an unpopular approach to life and spirituality. Persecution for righteousness' sake is not facing disagreements or oppositions based on differing moral codes. It's not simply knowing that people disagree with you. It's not having people argue with you when you share your opinions. See, we're usually experiencing persecution for self-righteousness' sake. And what we're experiencing is usually just discomfort. On top of this, we need to take a global perspective on persecution for living and responding out of Jesus' righteousness, because there are actually people all across our world who don't live in a country that promises religious freedom. There are Christians, many in our churches, that have suffered for their faith in their home country. They've been disowned by their family or by their societies for choosing Jesus. That is persecution. And while we're at it, persecution is not correction for our bad behavior. It's not feedback on our bad attitude. It's not pushback on our wrong perspective. It's not disappointment from bad expectations. It's not discord in our bad relationships. And it's not the consequences of our bad judgment. That's not persecution. That's often discipline. It's often feeling the conviction inside of us that comes from the Holy Spirit saying, you are wrong. And we would much rather feel comfortable by blaming someone else for why we feel bad. But Jesus says that when we trust and follow him and live and respond like him, then the kingdom of heaven belongs to us. And this is a cause for great joy, because the kingdom isn't only experienced someday in eternity. It can be accessed and experienced now as believers engage and encourage one another. And we see this in a small way now, and we expect it in its fullness later. You see, the kingdom of heaven present is living in community that blesses in the midst of curses. And the kingdom of heaven future is an eternity where Jesus ends all sin and all curses. As we live in this kingdom, making it visible and accessible through Jesus, God blesses us and provides our material and immaterial needs. And this blessing in the midst of persecution brings us the ability to have happiness regardless of human discomfort or persecution, which is why Jesus also says in the next verse, be happy about it, about persecution. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in the same way. Be happy? How can I be happy and glad when I'm so uncomfortable experiencing persecution? Well, I propose that it begins by thinking differently about persecution. It begins by seeing persecution as something that confirms your identity as a citizen of the kingdom of God. See, much like a passport confirms your citizenship to yourself and those around you as you journey through different countries, persecution gives you a confirmation that you belong to God, just like the ancient prophets did all throughout the Bible. There's no wondering or fear that you are not in the faith and on mission. The second way to readjust our thinking is by recognizing that persecution is bringing us an eternal reward. Jesus says, great is your reward. See, while persecution is presently painful, an eternal honor awaits. The Bible refers to them as crowns. Did you know that the Bible speaks of 5 crowns that God will give us on Judgment Day? Here are 5 crowns spoken of in Scripture, right? The first is the crown of life, James 1:12. The crown of righteousness, 2 Timothy 4:8. The crown of glory is spoken about in 1 Peter 5:3 and 4. The crown of victory, 1 Corinthians 9:24 and 25. And the crown of rejoicing spoken about by the Apostle Paul in 1 Thessalonians. As we close, I just want to look at 2 of these here to talk about the reward we will experience, right? And the first is a hereditary crown, and the second is an awarded crown. The first is the crown of righteousness spoken about by the Apostle Paul in 2 Timothy 4:8. Paul says this, "And now the prize awaits me, the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on the day of his return. And the prize is not just for me, but for all who eagerly look forward to his appearing." This crown is given to anyone who places their faith in Jesus as king and longs for his kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven. It's not a crown we earn because of anything we've done. It's a crown that God gives freely because of what Jesus has done, living perfectly, dying sacrificially, and resurrecting triumphantly. We receive it by faith as a member of his royal family. And this is why we follow Jesus as king, trusting that his ability to overcome persecution means that by the power of his Holy Spirit inside of us, we will also be able to overcome persecution, even if it results in our death. Or worse, our candidate not winning an election. This crown is available to anyone who sets down the kingship of their own life and takes Jesus up as king of their life. In return, Jesus takes our human crown and gives us two things: the eternal crown of righteousness that can't be taken away, and the Holy Spirit that comes to live inside of us, helping us to hear Jesus' voice, guiding us into truth, and giving us the power to say no to our destructive urges. Which brings me to the second crown, the crown of life mentioned by James in James 1:12. James says this, "God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterward, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him." This crown is a blessing given to us for patiently enduring and overcoming the desire to sin that wells up inside of us. It's a blessing from God as a result of obedience, listening to Jesus, determining what he asks us to do, and then asking God for the power of the Holy Spirit, spending time in his presence until we are strong enough to go out and act in obedience. The crown of life is an award God offers, not for defeating the people who persecute us through abusive behavior in return. But notice it says, through testing and temptation. Do not forget this. Persecution is a test that God allows in our life to see if we will respond like Jesus in return, blessing those who curse us and praying for those who hate us. Or whether we'll give in to the temptation to retaliate. The crown of life is a reward for mastering the desires at war inside of us, the desires to pursue comfort through self-medication or withdrawal from conflict. He asks us instead to pursue the kingdom of God by living as Jesus, making him known and inviting others to follow him in service as well. All of this brings me to just two questions I want you to wrestle with today, because they're crucial to receive the blessings of happiness that God offers us in the face of our inevitable persecution during an age of comfort seeking. The first one is this: Have you received the crown of righteousness? Have you turned from a life that pursues comfort and given your life to Jesus Christ? Have you confessed your pursuit of self-righteousness through personal codes of conduct, whether that's legalism or permissiveness? See, turning from self-righteousness and comfort-seeking looks like asking Jesus to take control of your life and forgive your self-centered pursuits. It's as simple as asking for his forgiveness right now in your heart and asking him to be your king so that you can follow his direction. If this is something you're choosing to do now, or you'd like help in doing, please reach out to us through the links. Call us on the phone. Come see us in person at the campus nearest you. We'd love to help you take your next step in following Jesus through baptism. And the second question is this: Are you battling for the crown of life? See, many of us are eager to join Jesus' bloodline, but we fail to recognize his call to live and spread his kingdom, and not by forcefully opposing the people who don't know him, but by obedient service to him, while defeating the sinful desires that well up inside of us by the power of his Holy Spirit. Battling for the crown of life looks like learning to hear God's voice in prayer through reading the scriptures by the mutual encouragement and exhortation of faithful Christian community. Time spent with Jesus in his presence, in reflection on his word with other believers, grows us in the strength to obey. And each step of obedience grows us in his righteousness. And those are the awards and achievements that he crowns us with. If you'd like to get connected in community, to be shaped and sharpened, to look more and more like Jesus, please reach out. Contact us today. Come meet us in person. Meet like-minded people who are pursuing Jesus and his joy, regardless of our circumstances. Will you pray with me? Father, we are grateful to be invited into your bloodline, that you offer us your righteousness, and that you give us opportunities through testing, through trials, through persecution, to grow in righteousness. God, please teach us to pursue the award of righteousness that comes from overcoming by your strength, by your power, based on what you have done. Give us joy in the midst of difficulty. Bless us as we reach out and respond to you in obedience. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for joining us all the way through to the end today. We're grateful that you chose to engage and learn to push through discomfort and become who Jesus has called you to be. Of course, we'd love to see you, whether it's online or in person. We've got all sorts of resources available on the web. We'd love to catch up with you. Have a blessed week.